perspective of either of them. Yes, somebody, 1 second,
Okay,
somebody.
yeah. Yes, I was going to add that the publishing outfits, the journals, the editors-in-chief also have a responsibility in this. So that if you know that if you want to publish your work, somebody is going to check all these, then you will have to do it before you. So that's the other perspective that
Okay, excellent response. So this takes my thoughts to when this whole discussion on predatory journals came up and good and credible journals came up. The role of the scientist really is science. There should be some people to complement the work of the scientist. And one of them, as is rightly said, is that peer review process to check that all these things are done. But if all of us are publishing in journals that has a turnaround of 2 weeks, has a turnaround of 1 day, and has a turnaround over a weekend, let's leave the rest.
Well, I think in addition to these two processes, which should affect the quality of papers that are published, the audiences, the readership audience also has a role. Because sometimes I read some papers in journals and I call the editors, write to them that I don't think that paper is correct. You need to look at it again and so on. So the value is doubtful and so that has also helped the editors to review their processes and come up with something that will be more helpful to the audience.
Thank you. Can I put a question out there? Would all of us subscribe to the view that citation should be a criteria for academic promotion? The readership that your publication is attracting. Yes. No, not the number. Not the number of citations. We'll work out the details later.
Okay.
But should it come up in a discussion?
Well,
No, it will lead to the number, but for now, let's just leave it. Should citation be considered? Okay,
Well,
but we have one dissenting view, so let's take it.
I also think,
Okay.
it should be no, because I have listened to one professor ask a question about citation. Why are they citing it? Are they criticizing it? Because citation can be that you criticize a paper and then build your argument. So why is it being cited?
I don't think
Is
that
it for
should
a
be a
good-
good reason to say no. The question is, should it be considered at all? Then how it will be considered,
Well-
the numbers and all the details would follow. But is it worth bringing it on the table for discussion? That's my question.
Okay.
The fact that somebody is criticizing it, for me, it's enough. But
but-
as to whether it should go for or against is another discussion.
Okay, so if it is 4, yes, I think it's
Yes.
important. But my point is the numbers, because...
Okay, we'll
it
come to
could
the
have-
numbers. I'll take 3 responses on this, otherwise it's going to take the whole day. Yes.
My answer is no.
Okay.
No, because if you can reason with me very well, you see, you have some good papers in bad journals, and you have some bad papers in the good journals. So, like somebody like me, if I see a journal, I say, in this journal is part of the predatory journal, I don't want to see it at all. I don't want to read it. Whereas there may be what? There may be good papers in that journal. So therefore, it's not good to see good citation be among the criteria for promotion.
Okay. Since you said heavy no, I'll take it and I'll take that one and that'll be no, this and there.
Well, I said no because one, citation is discipline specific. There are areas where you do quality work, and then with so much funded and then other things. But because limited people are working in that area, citation will be low. There are people who work in the general area, applied biology. There are so many people in that area, there is likelihood of getting high citation. That is one argument. Second argument now is that, depending on where you sit, if I've had several of those experiences, I've published a lot in Nature because they waive the processing fees for people who come from developing country. If they ask me today to pay, even 10% of their processing fees, I cannot pay. If you go to BMC, you submit an article now and they give you a waiver, there's high likelihood that your paper will be rejected. But if you are ready to pay, I bet you your paper will be fast track. So these are all factors that control publication in the higher impact journal and other thing, and then you cannot rely on it. Otherwise, you will be depriving a lot of people those opportunities.
Okay, those of us saying no, please let's go back to the question. Should citation be part of the discussion for promotion? So once you are giving your reasons, tailor your reasons why it should be and should not be. I don't want to get into the realm of what a good journal is, what a bad journal is, the kind of papers that get in there, and so on and so forth. That is going to distract us from what we are doing. All that I'm saying is that should citation be part of the discussion? Yes.
What is citation?
Has somebody ever read your work?
Yeah, where?
No, forget about the where.
Yeah, so
Is
you
there
need
any
to,
evidence?
What I'm saying, you need to publish the paper in a journal, maybe, and then people will read it and then probably want to cite it.
Yes.
And so you cannot talk about this without talking about the journals. And somebody mentioned some bad journals, some good journals, and all that.
Please, let me not cut you. I think we are making a mistake here.
Okay.
Your graduate student can cite your work. I know a number of professors that have never had a graduate student cite his or her work before.
Okay.
You can have your work in books. Let us not restrict. That's why I'm defining citations as evidence of somebody reading your work. So even if you've done something for this small locality, can you show evidence that they've read your work? Let us not take citation out of context and yes.
Back to the example you gave about you and then in the presence of 3 eminent professors, you had visibility. If those professors, being born after computer or before computer, had so many publications but are not visible on the internet, they're most likely going to get negative or even 0 citations. And then if you go following citation, you might end up giving them a 0. But they have a lot of work out there. Okay. But because...
Sorry, let me end here because of time. Sorry, let me end here because of time, please. Please. The industry is growing. Let's lend ourselves to the evolutions that are happening in the sector. I hear these remarks a lot because of my position as the research director. But please, there are top professors who were born before computers, and now they can digitize all their papers, and they are getting the needed citations. Please, citation, Elsevier has what it called the field-cited citation. So every discipline has a specific, it adjusts for the discipline-specific citation. We can have all these criticisms around, but it doesn't help us to answer that basic question. Is there evidence that somebody is reading your work? Nothing is a gold standard, but let's appreciate the evolution that is going on. The evolution that is going on is that for your research to have an impact, the first thing is that there should be evidence that somebody is reading your work. And from my point of view, that evidence should be established as part of the promotion criteria. You should show evidence that even if your work is today specific, it can only make an impact if a second person reads it. Even if it's locality specific, it can only make an impact if it's accessible to a second person. The form, the nature, the weaknesses, the strengths, we can resolve it. Okay. So, in terms of pushing the frontiers of knowledge, it can be at different levels, at the level of conceptualization, at the level of methods, and at the level of recommendations. Then, the don'ts in research, fabricating data, we've talked about this. Falsification of results, we've talked about it. Plagiarism, we've talked about it. Failure to meet ethical, legal, professional obligations, we all are fully aware of this, so I'm not going to belabor these points. And improper dealing with allegations of misconduct, issues of personal interest, issues of funding interest, issues of competing interest, and so on. Then I give you some resources for you to go think about it. And I'm happy for what is happening in Nigeria now. Because as I said, in Ghana, we don't have that national framework. And a lot of our universities don't have these frameworks. So this is something coming from University College London, and it has Code of Research Conduct. So I sit back and I say that when I became the director of my directorate at the university, one of the first things that I did was to have a research policy for the university. Over time, I'm asking myself, what does the research policy cover these essentials? So within your university, how many of you have Code of Research Conduct? Code of Research Conduct. It's only University of Port Harcourt? Can he get the mic, please?
We actually have 2 units that handle that in my university. The research and publication units, and then quality and assurance unit. So they have policies that help in ensuring sound conduct of research.
You see, I'm in a hurry to say something.
Okay.
As I indicated, we also have the research policy.
Yes.
But is the content reflective of the Code of Research?
Okay, I have not gone through the
We also have
policy
a quality assurance unit.
Yes,
but
yes.
They don't have anything on the conduct of research. So, for instance, a typical thing is that in a Code of Research, the conduct of research, it will tell you that for whatever research that you do, the data has to be on the university's website.
Oh, no.
I like the response. Yeah, again, we recently got an IP policy, but it doesn't have Code of Research, the conduct of research in it. You understand? So, as I said, I've given an example of data. Another example is conflict of interest. If you are doing a researcher, it's basic, isn't it? You make sure that your opinions are not influencing the research outcomes. This has to be clearly stated. And if you look at the previous slide, it says improper dealing with allegations of misconduct. So if a professor is found not abiding by the tenets of the Code of Research Conduct, what happens? So that is what should go into the Code of Research Conduct. And as I said, University of Cape Coast, we have a research policy, but it's not detailed on how research should be done. So these resources I thought might help you if you go back and you want to think about your university having a code for research conduct. So this is from University College of London. That is from London School of Economics. And what is interesting about this is that this is for a particular faculty. So for those of us arguing that it's subject specific and so on and so forth, what your National Research Office and University Research Office should do is to give you that broad framework. Then if you think that your area requires some specificity, as a dean, as a provost, as a head of department, you should have a code for the conduct of research, which is specific to your discipline. The first thing is that, do we buy into the philosophy? And as I said, this is my goal today. It's a debate, and at the end of the day, we should all appreciate how things are evolving. Then the third one is at the national level. This is the Research Council, United Kingdom, its policy and guidelines on the governance of good research. So I've given you 2 of them at the level of the university and the third one at the national level. Research integrity. Here I start by asking some questions. What is research integrity? Is your hand up? Sorry. It's been up for a while, eh?
We're able to solve some of our problems. I don't really believe in individual university having this code of conduct because of our nature of our human problem, politics. I would have loved it if there is a central one that I don't need to know anybody. I mean, it's an integrity to see somebody reading my work. What about number? It's not, people are working in an area that is so new. But that somebody is reading, give me joy. We need some foundational reform so that we that are coming can do something worthwhile. Maybe it's good to become professor before you start talking. Because as you are coming up, you need papers. They won't promote you. They will give you a load of work to work. You have families. You need some money. And now you are talking.
Another thing is that some areas of studies are more interesting than others. So that some people are doing some work in some areas which people don't really find so interesting does not mean that they are also not contributing. So they tend to become more discouraged when the others are maybe probably people in the health sector are having the order of the day, people in epidemiology are having a lot of high number of people looking at their works. But somebody who is in physics or who is in mathematics is really not having so many people reading their works. And then there's a way that they begin to now say, these are people who are more productive. But the answer to me is really not so. Okay. They are just at times being lucky. Okay.
These are two very valid points. How would we look at how a young researcher evolves in academia? And let me share, 1 second please. Let me share an example of what the University of Cape Coast is doing in terms of how we want to bring up young researchers. So in my office, every year we give out research support grants and we give out research awards. So we've put people in bands. What I mean by bands is research bands. So people who are within the first 6 years in the university, we target them and give them a special award, given the little thing that you've done. Then people between 6 years and 12 years, so less than 6 years, we call them evolving researchers. Between 6 and 12 years, we call them evolved researchers. And more than 12 years, we call them outstanding researchers. So given each of these three bands, we look at what you've done, and you compete among your peers. And then you are given award and support grants for that. And I think this is something that we can all replicate across board. Then, my good friend, the issue that you raised is very valid. And as I said to him, there are field cited citations. So in areas, recently the award that we did, which was just last week, we gave 2 awards. The second one was for music. And the truth of the matter is that in your spare time, read about funding for intradisciplinary research, funding for interdisciplinary research, funding for cross-disciplinary research, funding for multidisciplinary research, and funding for transdisciplinary research. So I talked about 5 things. Funding for intradisciplinary research. You're not going to get any funder. Think about funding for interdisciplinary research. Think about funding for cross-disciplinary research. Think about funding for multidisciplinary research. And what is attracting funds now is funding for transdisciplinary research. And I like the definition for transdisciplinary research. It talks about when there's convergence among disciplines and intellectual ownership across disciplines. So we tell them that even if you are in music or you are in whatever, make music useful to health. This is where the funding is. Because as a global community, if you look at the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, it tells you clearly that no single discipline can solve the challenges. That is why transdisciplinary research is attracting a lot of resources now. Yeah. Somebody, yes, please. Okay, go ahead.
All right, thanks. I will subscribe to what Prof said about the local code of conduct for research. In my college, before you are considered for promotion, your journal has to pass through journal verification committee, and of course they will look at the or the value, and of course they will have to award marks before you are considered for promotions. Yeah. Committee per college. And with this, and at the same time, we have what we call HREC, that is Research Ethics Committee. So if you are using human sample, human subject, animal research, you just have to apply. And any of your journal you are presenting for promotion will definitely pass through the journal HREC. And of course, the Journal Verification Committee will ask for the ethic approval before the review. The most importantly is what you have said, for each discipline, they should have a research code of conduct for research. Because for my own discipline, I cannot, because that's the problem we're having with journal these days, editors. Because sometimes the editors, they barely have deeper knowledge of some of the research work. And of course, they will have to assess this based on their perspective. But if each discipline can have code of conduct for research, it's going to help a lot. Thanks.
Thank you. Yes, you have the mic.
Well, I just want to talk about the maybe area of interest, like maybe one's field. Like I'm statistics. Then I came across somebody that set up a lab called Laboratory for Interdisciplinary Statistical Analysis. But I tried to move from, because especially in Nigeria, mathematical sciences sometimes can be so dry. But I'm saying that, okay, why don't we make this area an applied area, make it interesting to the people? That's what I'm doing naturally. If I teach my student, I will make them, as they understand the theory, I push them to the applied. And that's why most of the time, you see that some people are professors in mathematics, you are not friendly, no mentorship, and all that. And these young ones, they want to learn. And for us to make it interesting to them, we teach them, take it from theory to application, and then be friendly to them. We have people in mathematical sciences. Thank you. And again, sorry, please. If we're in a dry area, for instance, maybe theoretical physics, then you'll be publishing your work in association journals. You see them there. Theoretical things, you can find it in a journal of associations, like maybe Nigeria Statistical Association, Mathematical Physics, something like that. Those associations, you will see those papers there, and people will reference it a lot.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Prof. I'm sorry to take us back to the issue of citation. For some of us coming up as researchers, personally, I've had issues with publishing in quality journals with citation in mind. What I mean is access. How will the community I'm presenting findings on access my work? Researchers in the same community, how will they get access to these papers when they will have to buy, and the institutions they represent have not subscribed for such access? So it could, in a lot of ways, dampen the spirit of those aiming high at publishing with quality journals. AAU, I think, I want to suggest, should push institutions to help in subscribing for journals in such a way that people can have access to research work without paying for them when they really don't have the resources to do so. The other one is on
Is somebody taking notes for AAU? These are good suggestions. Okay.
The other one is on mentoring. We have quite a number of researchers that are traveling overseas to study, and it's difficult applying the skills and knowledge they have back home. They somehow might not be relevant, impacting directly that community when the problems are somehow impossible to solve when the equipment to use at home is not available. So I don't know how we can have a structure. In Nigeria, NUC came up with a policy recently to collate the list of professors in Nigeria, the list of professors. And it's a database that exists today that people in different disciplines can identify themselves. And somehow, I feel if we have such for Africa, we know people in our upline that have experience in some areas, perhaps have equipment in those areas, and we can collaborate with them and do more meaningful research and publish them.
Okay. Thank you very much. I think these are very useful recommendations. Let me comment on the last one and the first one. Starting with the first one, I would advise that as a young researcher, let me be very straight with this, don't buy into some of these arguments that are coming up that if you publish in a high quality journal, the immediate beneficiaries will not get access to it. My personal view is that it's a made up excuse. You can have a publication in a very high quality journal. If you're an academic, you belong to a university, you have a blog. What stops you from putting the paper on your blog? What stops you? There are diverse ways of making the document accessible to the local community. As I said, I think it's a clear made-up argument why you don't want to get into top journals. As an academic, a young researcher, you should have a trajectory for your progression. And what I mean by a trajectory is that you need to make yourself locally relevant, but as you move along, you should make yourself internationally relevant. If you're an academic and you've spent 15 years, 20 years, and you don't have international recognition, only because you say that top quality journals are not accessible to local community, I don't think it's a tenable argument. You can still publish in those top journals, you can have a mix of them, you can have different platforms for making your journals available. And again, related to the question that my colleague asked, this is what universities' research offices are supposed to do. So what my research office does is on an annual basis, it creates a platform for industry engagement. We bring industries, all your publications that you feel industry should know of, write to us, make a case for it, we evaluate it, and about 20 of them, we showcase them. So university research offices, as I said, scientists will remain as scientists, but university research offices are supposed to help scientists publicize their work. The other thing we do is what I've talked about. We do an annual research awards and grant ceremony. We invite industry to come on board, and we select people to do presentations on what we are doing. So it's not an issue of trade-off, and this is not the first time I'm hearing it, but I don't think it's tenable. You can still get into the top journals and make your papers accessible. On the last point that you raised, I think is fantastic, and it's a suggestion I always give to AAU. We need regional level harmonization of a number of the things that we do in the context of the use of laboratory equipment. But I always say that it should start from within the university. I don't know the case in other universities, but in the University of Cape Coast, you can have two departments, department of, let's say, biological, whatever, another one, physical, whatever, and this department doesn't want this other department to use the laboratory equipment. So even within departments, within schools and faculties in a university, we are not sharing the use of equipment. And this, in the case of AAU, I keep on telling them that now we are pushing for regional harmonization. If we don't start with within-country harmonization, the regional harmonization will be worse. And now you see the top universities in Africa harmonizing. So University of Ghana is trying to harmonize, benchmark what it's doing with the University of Cape Town, without thinking about how University of Ghana would benchmark what it's doing with the University of Cape Coast. So now if University of Cape Coast approaches University of Ghana, it will say that my standards are based on University of Cape Town. So if I have to change it, then Cape Town would have to change it before I come back and think about how University of Cape Coast can benchmark with me. So we should transition and progressively do this harmonization. Even within our universities, move to the national level and the regional level. And this, again, as you rightly said, should be championed by AAU. Okay, so in terms of research integrity, I had some questions, but I'm going to proceed with the responses for it. The first is, what is research integrity? Why should we pay attention to research integrity? At what stage of research should we worry about research integrity? And what should be done to ensure research integrity? So in terms of responses, I give you the scope of issues as far as research integrity is concerned. the honesty governing the work that you are doing, how rigorous is the work that you are doing, and how transparent and open are the data, the tools that you are working with. Do you have respect for the subjects? Do you care about the subjects that is enabling you tell the story that you would want to put out there? So these are the 4 issues that you need to think about if you are talking about research integrity. And why do we have to think about research integrity? If you don't consciously put out there a policy on research integrity, nobody would trust your work. Nobody would have confidence in your work. We are quick in blaming policymakers that they are not using our work. They are not using your work because of several reasons, one of them giving that there's mistrust and lack of confidence. So if you have a policy statement that clearly says that a dishonest researcher will be dealt with in ABCD manner, that is a starting block for getting policymakers to have confidence in the research that you do. So each university, each country should make sure that there is a policy on research integrity. And the policy on research integrity should say that this analysis that we've done is rigorous because of A, B, C, D. This analysis that we've done has not disrespected the subjects that are giving us the information. If you don't have a research integrity policy, it's difficult for policymakers, as I indicated, to have confidence in the kind of work that you do. The other question that I asked is whether research integrity should be tailored to a specific stage in research. No. Research integrity should start from conceptualization up to the point where your recommendations are being used. Research integrity, there's a tendency that you think about it only at the point of data analysis. Research integrity should start at the point of conceptualization. And what I mean by that is that whatever you are conceptualizing, is it contributing to knowledge? Aren't you doing salami slicing? So be clear in your mind that I'm pushing the frontiers of knowledge at the point where you are conceptualizing the research idea. So again, from the social sciences point of view, I'm being mindful of other disciplines. People come to me and they say, I want to investigate the relationship between financial development and economic growth. Then I tell them that everybody knows there is a relationship between financial development and economic growth. So at that level of conceptualization, what is the level of honesty in terms of contribution to knowledge? Then you're going to see later on in my slides, then they'll come up and say that this has been done in ABCD countries, but it has not been done in Ghana. This has been done in all the 9 regions of the country, but it has not been done in the 10th region of the country. This is a research problem. And we leave it there. It was done up to 2010, and since 2010, nobody knows what has been done. So I want to do it from 2011 to 2018. Professors, let's be honest with ourselves. Is this enough problem? In terms of honesty, are you contributing to knowledge? Yes, it's been done up to 2009, but you should give solid reasons why between 2009 and to date, the findings up to 2009 would have changed. In which case, we have a new theory. The fact that it's been done in 9 regions of the country, what is peculiar about the 10th region, in which case the theory that binds the 9 regions together would not hold. So we need another finding in the 10th region to come up with a new theory. Research integrity. We should start from conceptualization to the point where our findings are being used. As I indicated, with all these discussions, at the center of it is that you need a policy to guide your research integrity. And that is where you have people having confidence in the research that you are doing.
I don't know what they do to help us with our universities. Because the problem we're having with the coming generation is bigger than what you think we have now. Sir, our students are buying projects. I just discovered some website where in which they have to pay some amount, 10,000 to maybe First Bank. Somebody will just download, give them everything. You can see that future, there is a problem ahead. There are turnitin in university. Implementation is our problem. I don't know how AAU can help us in this regard with the universities. If we start from the foundation, this undergraduate project, once our students know that it has to pass through some tests that is even beyond our university, before we even give them pass mark in these their thesis, it will make them sit back. Integrity is the first, and it's nowhere. I don't know how you can help.
Thank you. I think it's a very sensitive point that you've raised. We all need to, my response is that we all need to be committed to the process. And I think even this platform that we are having now is helping us be more aware of it and identify ways to deal with it. But I perfectly agree with you. What is ahead of us might be more worrying than the current situation. I can open my email to you. I get emails from Jordan, other countries where people say, write my MPhil thesis, I'm giving you $15,000. It's happening. I mean, I wouldn't challenge you at all. So the problem ahead might be more worrying than what we are experiencing now. So we all need to be on board the discussion. Yes.
Well, just to add to that, I don't think it's AAU business. Maybe we have to start from the home front. You know, if we keep glossing over it, it will come around and hit us like a flood. And really, yes, you are right. This thing is coming like a flood. And before it swallows us, we really must handle it, you know, headlong. The policy thing, you know, many times we put things on paper and we don't implement. I don't know if it's an African problem. And I think we should start from there, right from the top. But the various institutions, undergraduate projects, master's, PhD, it's now almost the same thing. They don't want to do anything. And then we just let them go. So I think we should go back to our various institutions and tackle these things headlong. That's what I think.
Thank you very much. Yes.
I really want to put the blame solely on the supervisors. I have been in research ethics committee where students submit proposals that supervisors have not read at all, and then they sign it up. If we have been put in positions to vet what the students are doing and also follow them through the process, and we take these things seriously, some of these errors can be minimized. So it's to speak to ourselves that we need to go back and begin to do what we're supposed to be doing as supervisors. The other one I see is prolific publications from researches that you cannot really say they are correct. I see a lot of them, you know, you say I've supervised 50 master's projects in 1 year. How much supervision did you do to make sure that in 1 year 50 students have finished their master's projects, and then from this one you've published 50 papers? You know, we really need to think back and then pass a message to our colleagues to do things rightly. Research integrity is very important to help us move forward.
Yes. So let me take this to, you want to say something? Okay. You want to say something? Okay.
Thank you very much.
Please keep your comments short so that...
Yeah, there are a lot of things that I would have actually wished to comment on, because this is the first time actually speaking here today. But then, let me just pass comment on what has just been discussed, or what we are discussing right now about the problem we have with students downloading projects from other universities and then presenting it as theirs. I know you, the program is still going to talk about that later, but I believe that this problem is multifaceted, because there are a lot of, I mean, the situation is not really right. For instance, supervisors are overshadowed with all kinds of responsibilities in the universities. Some of them are the ones to process results. They are the ones to engage in administrative work that they want to do all kind of things. They're also going to enter into their own research for their own promotion, and then so many other responsibilities, which we actually, which prevent them from doing thorough job in looking into all the projects. And then we don't forget that we have, the population of students and projects to be supervised are so huge. I think you have close to 30, 40, 50, as Prof has rightly said. So how can a single supervisor do all of that? And we expect that supervisor to bring out the best and then scrutinize all the papers. That's number one. But I think in South Africa, those of our colleagues that are from there, they have a best way out of it. University invested in software that could really, if once they run the project through, software will actually identify where they got all of that from. I think students in that part of the country are really doing well because they know if their project fail to scale through, they're in trouble. Also, they don't do all of that there. So I think my advice to AAU is to actually find a way of introducing this kind of thing to other universities in the sub-region or in African continent so that they can also engage in all of that. Of course, it has to start from each university.
Okay, so let's keep the comments very short, please. Brief. It's information, so brief.
Yes. Just follow up on what he said. Actually, AAU organized a training recently, this year actually, in Lagos, on what you are talking about, actually generally on quality assurance. And quite a large number of universities were there. But that training was attended by directors of academic planning and directors of quality assurance. So all these things we are discussing, including what he talked about, we were giving information on how we should deal with them in our individual universities, the issues of the softwares and so on. So I think it's more of maybe the group here, not the same group that came for that training. So these things are actually resident in almost every university, except the vice chancellors have not downloaded all these to, or rather the directors of quality assurance. And every university is mandatory that you should have quality assurance, you should also have academic planning and so on. And all these things are embedded in them.
Okay. Thank you very much. Samuel, is it possible, or if you could educate us, whether AAU puts on its website all the slides for these workshops? They're doing trainings all over the place. So the question is, do they have all these slides on their website?
It will have to be the issue of permission. So, like Prof has presented here, it's his content, and maybe he might have some few things in there that he wouldn't want to share. However, if we get the permission from Prof, those who are here will receive the slides. And then, yes, they have not answered the question. It's not on our website for people to download. However, maybe we'll look at the prospect of putting it there. It will raise a lot of questions since this is a paid workshop, and he wouldn't want to put a slide out there and somebody say, okay.
Okay, so the response is that it's not there. So as a group, no, you are getting all the slides. You are getting all this, but I strongly feel that each facilitator should make its slides available, whether it's paid or not. Yes.
You know, yesterday when I met the director of research and planning at the Secretariat, we spent a long period talking about that. You run the workshop. All the African universities cannot send representation for various reasons. So you need to make available this information through your website. Let us know that this is the support AAU is giving to African universities to help. Or you say, no, it is paid workshop. The people paid $500. You cannot make it there for free. I say, look, once the facilitator has been paid to do a research, you can present it as part of the reports of the workshop, that in this workshop we had 20 papers. These are the slides of the papers. It is not the same reading the slides as when you have sat down through the meeting, but at least there are some resolutions that can help us do things differently. And he didn't really see why they should do that. If they do it, people won't subscribe to their workshops. They will wait till when they finish, they ambush the proceedings and so on. But I think we need to do it differently. So maybe this
Prof,
is coming up here.
Please, we are recording everything, and it's live on Facebook and it's on YouTube. So that is a movement AAU has started. So everything will be on Facebook and on YouTube. You can download all the videos, everything.
At a later stage? Yes.
As we are even, it's everything is live.
Facebook now, you see what we are doing here is live streaming on Facebook.
Okay, please give it to him. Then we can. Please, we are running against time, so.
Okay, thank you. Please, I want to go against, what, your own submission about, being given, saddled with, a lot of responsibility. So that's why the supervisor doesn't have chance to check the students in the project very well. Because if you want to go by the integrity, go by the principle of integrity, you need to protect yourself. You getting me now? So you just have to, and you just have to stage up the campaign against it. Downloading other somebody's project. Now, we are implementing it in our department now. For us to give you a project student, you just have to at least design a problem by yourself. If you call yourself a researcher and a senior academic staff in the department, but the problem that other departments may have is that superiority complex. We may have a professor that doesn't have the chance to supervise students, and for the sake of the money that is going to collect at the end of the day about the supervision, so maybe you want to at least attract a larger number of students to himself. So in our department, at least students will come up with a research proposal and come and defend it before us. So, and the supervisor will be there. If your student is saying rubbish during the presentation, you rubbish yourself. Once you know that, you will not allow the students to give you any that is not from you. And at the end of the day, when we see that, okay, you are not doing thorough job, we will draw all the students from you, give you to the junior ones, and it's going to be going to be a slide on you. So if the other departments or all the universities can, based on that, I want to believe the supervisor will be doing a thorough job. Thank you.
Colleagues, I think there's something that I'm picking up. This conversation can go on till lunchtime. But the bottom line is that we all appreciate the need for integrity and a policy that should guide what our understanding of integrity. So that should be the conclusion on that, isn't it? Yes. Otherwise, if you are bringing in personal experiences and so on, we might not finish. It's an important issue. The other thing from integrity is the impact that I talked about. And I mentioned this earlier on, so I'm going to move swiftly on this. As I tried doing earlier on, I said, tell me what is the demonstrable, tangible evidence. Walk me through the process and say that this has led to pushing of the frontiers of academic knowledge, and this has changed the lives, the economic and social lives of people. And this is the definition from the Economic and Social Research Council on what impact is. So impact should clearly be demonstrable. If you are not able to demonstrate impact, then it's a challenge. And there are clear pathways for doing that. I gave you the ESRC web link on my first slide. Go on there and look at the pathways. It starts from even the conceptualization. That is when you begin to think about impact. A lot of us say that policymakers are not using our research findings simply because you didn't involve them. There is an ego thing about individuals. So policymakers would want to be part of the story right from the beginning. So again, this is what university research offices are supposed to do. University research offices if you have a national research office, go there, tell them that, let them give you your research agenda for this year up until 5 years. Come to your university, share it. Go to the ministry, speak to the ministers, let them tell you their research agenda. A lot of us sit in our silos and we think it's a problem. But in reality, it's an academic problem, but it's not a political problem. It's not a feasible problem. And again, a lot of us write recommendations, we say the recommendations have not been used. This is not a platform for us to talk about writing policy briefs. The recommendations that we write in our academic articles are not the recommendations that policymakers need. The language for writing recommendations is not to say that Bank of Ghana should reduce policy rate by 2%. The governor will think about the implications of reducing the policy rate by 2%. We should buy bed nets to reduce malaria. The Minister of Health will think about the implications of buying bed nets from person A who belongs to this political party and so on and so forth. We need to think about the implications of our recommendations. There's one thing writing an academic recommendation, and it's another thing writing policy implications of our recommendations. And it's not part of our training. It's a skill you need to develop. A lot of us have been trained only up to the point of writing academic recommendations. And we supervise students, we say that let it be sharp, let it be focused, and we leave out the implications. And you cannot write the implications if you've not engaged with the policymaker. An ESRC platform would give you all this pathway right from conceptualization. A lot of us think about impact when we have results. It doesn't work like that. Okay. Then there are three different types of impact that ESRC defines. One is instrumental, and during the snack break, my sister was sharing something with me, and this is what it's here. Influencing the development of policy practice or service provision, shaping legislation, altering behavior. It's a challenge attributing your work to these. But if you've done the work and there is evidence of the work that has been done, and you have the situation before and you have the situation after, your work simply fits in. So although attribution becomes a problem, contribution is feasible. So your work can be instrumental in influencing or in altering a behavior. Once the orientation of the work, the findings of the work aligns with the change in practice. And there's evidence that there's a change in practice. Another way by which we can think about impact is conceptual, contributing to the understanding of policy issues and reframing debates. What is our thinking? What are the conclusions of our work? Can we show evidence that conceptually, the way we defined, as I said, in terms of the WHO measurements for malnutrition, how many of us ever wrote papers criticizing the population that was used in setting the standards? So that if in 2006 it changed, you can easily and comfortably say that in 1999 I wrote this paper, and one of the criticisms was that it doesn't support the weight and height that we have in Africa. Can our papers show that demonstrable evidence that conceptually our critique from the literature and our findings from the empirical work has led to this change? So although nobody singularly can say that it is my research that led to the reframing of the debates, there is that evidence that prior to that, all the Nobel Prize winners that we can think about, they started their work 30 years before they got the Nobel Prize. 20 years before they get the Nobel Prize. You don't do your work now and get a Nobel Prize tomorrow. It doesn't happen. There should be evidence, and this was my response to my good friend. As a young researcher, you should have a career path. Start with the local context. Let's see people saying that you are making a change in the area of microfinance. Let it be seen at mesofinance. Let it be seen at macrofinance. And let it be seen at global finance. You have that trajectory. But the reality on the ground is that I get a lot of papers for assessment for promotion, and the first comment is that a professor in what? A professor in what? You see finance there, you see health there, you see corruption there, you see the papers are not linked. So you cannot see that embodiment of a professor in the area that that person seeks to profess in. The third area is capacity building through technical and personal skill development. You say these things, as I said, it's very sensitive, but it's the reality on the ground. We have all the academic papers, but we cannot comfortably say that I've trained 10 PhDs. Capacity building. In instances where we show evidence that we've built capacity in training PhDs, it's only in this part of the world, in terms of Ghana, that we see professors without PhDs, students. In other jurisdictions, it's a criteria for being a professor. As I said, it's the hard truth, but it has to be said. There are a lot of universities in Africa where professors have exited and their area of specialization has collapsed. The only way your research can make impact is this third one. Capacity building through technical and personal skill development. Thank you. Research ethics. This goes to explain the diagram that I showed you earlier on. The issue of integrity, ethics, transformation, sustainability, the conduct, they are so interrelated. So you see the issues coming up over and over again under each of them. You see the first bullet, should aim to maximize benefit for individuals and society and minimize risk and harm. That ethical consideration should come in at the outset. And this is only when you can tap the impact when you get to the end of the work. The rights and dignity of individuals and groups should be respected. We saw this earlier on. Participation should be voluntary and appropriately informed. Let me say a couple of words on this third bullet. I sit on the university's ethical review board. And there's a form that they have to go through, and people always talk about issues of confidentiality. And people talk about issues of anonymity. Then you ask them, how are you going to ensure anonymity? I'm not going to put the names of the subjects out there. Then I say, is that enough to ensure anonymity? If you are taking data on SK NIM, and you have my height, you have my telephone number, you have the make of my car, you have the department that I sit in. With these 4 indicators, wouldn't be enough to identify who SK NIM is. This again is not part of our formal training. How to anonymize data, how to ensure confidentiality. How do you ensure confidentiality? The data will be kept only on my laptop. Nobody has access to my laptop. Professors, researchers, let us be careful in the way we treat our subjects. Research should be conducted with integrity and transparency. Lines of responsibility and accountability should be clearly defined. How many of us have ever done that in terms of accountability and responsibility for doing research? Who is accountable for the ills that emerge out of your research? Who is accountable? Who is accountable for the ills that emerge out of your research? The research. Oh, you want to ask a question on impact? Let me finish this, then we'll come back. Yes. Who is responsible?
Yeah, from the legal point of view, the researcher and the institution, especially when you want to claim big money, you have to run after the institution.
That is a perfect response. Institutions should begin to know that once they have researchers who are employees of the university, whatever they do they are responsible and they are accountable to the kind of research that they do. That is why, as a university, you should have a research policy, and the research policy should have all the things that I've talked about: the conduct, the integrity, the ethics, and the transformation and sustainability of the research findings. So it's both the researcher and the institution that are responsible for whatever else that come out of the research. It's not only related to money. Sometimes the discomfort that you cause to your subject can end up in legal issues, and the university is accountable for that. Yes, your question.
My question I want to ask is the number of undergraduates produced by university one of the impact factors for university, because both private, government, every university, they want you to pass. You can't go to Senate and tell them that because this my student have not done, that's why I don't have any of them graduating. And these students are not ready to do anything. They are not ready to do any. I'm not thinking maybe rating universities, because you say this social university are produced, are graduated this number of students. Because if you start from that, because university, they want you to graduate them anyhow.
Okay, so it's a good point. My response is that every university should define what it wants. You understand? So if you want to be a teaching university focusing on undergraduate work, that is it. If you want to be a university for postgraduate work, that is it. If you want to be a research university, that is it. The unfortunate story is that a lot of universities don't know what they want to be. Yes, that's the unfortunate story. But if you're a university that you call yourself a research university and you want to be recognized internationally, you downplay undergraduate work. Because research university focuses on graduate work and the research that is done by staff. If you want to be ranked by the Times Higher Education, I know a lot of people would open up for a criticism on whether the metric that Times Higher Education uses is credible or not. I'm open to such a discussion, but the point is that I feel dampened if I sit in an international meeting and everybody around the table says that my university is 672, my university is 4, my university is 20. The University of Cape Coast, I have to keep quiet. But if you want to be ranked by Times Higher Education, undergraduate is not part of the story. Even the 30% within the teaching, 15% is the reputation of your teaching output. So they'll do a survey and find out what your outputs are doing out there. It takes 15% of the 30%. Then they look at doctorate to staff ratio and doctorate to undergraduate ratio. So emphasis is on what? The number of doctorates to the number of undergraduate students. So you should know what you want as a university and push for that agenda. I know a number of private universities, they are not there yet in terms of graduate work as far as Ghana is concerned. So most of them, they make money through undergraduate enrollment. And again, AAU had a workshop on research commercialization where we talked about these things. So again, what does your university want? Push for that agenda. Independence of research should be maintained, and where conflict of interest cannot be avoided, they should be explicit. The research environment, I talked about it earlier on. What is governing the engagement of research? What is the legal framework within which we are doing the research? The infrastructure for doing the research, is it available? Currently, there is a hot debate going on in my university. Because Ghana, I don't know whether Nigeria, you have the same situation. The government, on an annual basis, gives research allowance and book allowance to academic staff. So last week, we got our keynote speaker asking the question whether if we want to fund research in Ghana, should it be in the current form where the government on an annual basis gives us research allowance and book allowance? This has attracted a lot of media attention because around this time, university teachers are going on strike because this year we have not received our book and research allowance. Then this keynote speaker pulls up last week and makes this comment. And it's all over the place on media, and even the university, they say that I've brought in this man to come and say this to us. But the key question is that are we having the right infrastructure to engage in research? Do we have the right financial resources to engage in research? I take a hard position by saying that sometimes it's better not doing it as far as research is concerned than doing it halfway. Because you're going to produce bad science. And the implications of bad science is worse than when we don't have any knowledge on what we think the alternative hypothesis is. So if you don't have the right laboratory equipment, if you don't have the right funding, we need that big push for research to come up with the needed funding. Otherwise, we'll continue doing research in silos, like we are doing now. Until we get a national data set, we don't do any work at the national level. But our counterparts in the developed world, you find a university that is doing a national level work based on funding. So it's comparable to what is done at the statistical offices. But you would hardly find universities in this part of the country doing longitudinal studies. Even at the national level, they don't have the resources to do such studies. So we need a right infrastructure, the research environment. Benchmarking best practices. How many of us sit in universities that does benchmarking? How many of us sit in universities that does benchmarking? We know what benchmarking is? I should explain. Okay, since you are doing it, you can explain it. Yeah.
Well, we basically compare ourselves with those we consider are better than us. So you look at all the various criteria that are important, in terms of citation, and all those things. So that you say, okay, if they have maybe 10 citations, you want to target to have 5 in the next few years, and you basically chase them, and we've adopted this Shanghai ranking. There is a university that is helping to benchmark universities. Instead of us going to what we know we can achieve, that is to rank, we can at least benchmark and say among this set of universities in this area, we can hold our own, knowing that we will fail if we attempt to rank.
So thank you very much. That is a good example. So this is the presentation that I gave last week on my university. So I'm benchmarking the publications per year, across the different years over time with the Kwame Nkrumah University of Science and Technology and the University of Ghana. So this is what we mean by benchmarking. So in the area of research, I said to them that I'm not even worried that University of Cape Coast is down here. Who can tell me what my worry is? The widening gap. So as far as 2013 is concerned, look at the gap between this and that. So if I benchmark, I go to Kwame Nkrumah University and I begin to ask questions. What happened in 2015 here that it didn't happen here? In 2017, what happened here that it didn't happen here? And the concept of benchmarking should even be done within universities. Within universities, you should be able to benchmark colleges against each other, departments against each other. We call ourselves researchers, but we don't use indicators to measure our performance and our decision makings in our respective universities. And what I do is that, I don't want to bore you with this, what I do is that I give all these statistics, what is happening across different colleges over time, the number of staff, and I begin to ask the Vice Chancellor that if this particular college has 270 members of staff, this is their research output, 121, compared to another one that has lesser, 189 and 131. And I tell them that this is what University Council should be using in making resource allocations, depending on what the university wants to achieve. So the issue of benchmarking and ranking are two different concepts and extremely essential concepts that we should all go by. Thank you very much. So this has to do with the first session on outputs, outcomes, and impact as far as research is concerned. The second area that we need to move into is research reproducibility. I'll allow for 2-3 minutes, questions, comments, then we can wrap up that discussion on outputs, outcomes, and impact, if there are any.
Thank you very much, sir. Sometimes what you say, should I say, depresses me. Yeah, because I'm just still climbing. I'm still a beginner. And most of the things you've just said now is actually adding to the struggles I'm thinking I have to face in my career. A particular one is the infrastructure. You know, you actually say we need infrastructure, but sometimes I ask myself, who will provide this infrastructure? We are not strictly policymakers. Some of us may not find our way into governments, whether of the school or of the state, and we are just there. So who will provide this infrastructure? It's like you just keep on talking and battling and keep on battling, and before you know, with the current system that is not so good, you become a professor yourself, and you still keep on saying this, I'll keep on saying it, and that's it. So I am really depressed. So infrastructure, but I've been hearing that since I started my little career, and I'm still hearing it now, and I'm so sure I'll hear it in the next 25 years. Thank you.
Let me come to him then. Thank you.
Well, I think I guess this is the reason for workshops like this. I'm sure every vice chancellor that sends, especially the younger generation, to this kind of workshop is to sensitize us to what is possible and what is not possible. I think he helped us when he was making his presentation about mentorship. A few of us, I'm sure, in this room went through this process. I think the young man here, somebody talked about publishing, the difficulties, even in penetrating. Everybody they want you to publish in high-impact journals. In one university where I used to be, now they talk about it must be Scopus indexed and so on before you can be promoted. But the point is, we know in every career, you have to rise through mentorship. Even in business. I come from a part of Nigeria where we're mostly business people. You have to attach yourself to somebody. Nobody, like he said, nobody starts today and becomes Nobel laureate. What helped me, I believe what you are saying now is the kind of thing I went through in 1991, 92 when I came back from Canada. I almost went back. I had my visa to Canada, back to US. But I said no. It's either I end up in Canada or US and continue like those who are there. But you see, that frustration will come later, even when you decide to stay there. So if you decide to stay in Africa, the thing is, even in all these pockets of frustration we have, people are succeeding. Look at your university. You must have people who are succeeding. Ask yourself, how? How are they making it? So it's only when you ask yourself that question that you will see that some of these frustrations, at the end of the day, if you persist and look for ways of overcoming the challenges, you will make it somehow. People have made it even in very difficult environments. I know the challenge and the frustration is everybody wants you to use the kind of data that he's talking about. But we also know we don't have the infrastructure, we don't have the facilities. But you can also make a difference by looking for funding. It's difficult. You will receive all kinds of I regret. But with time, and I'm saying this with all sense of having gone through the system, and I've also sat on the headship of an institution that gives research grants in Nigeria. And I know that there are people who have written, and then suddenly they make it. Just one. And I mean, it's like, you know, there's something they say about success. Everybody now is looking for that same person. So we shouldn't be, it's the same issue that my colleague talked about. When we were challenged as a university with ranking, we're a small university, like he said. You have to define, our own definition is postgraduate and research. So we're not worried about universities that have 40,000 students. We have, I think we're just 200 and something. But those 200 and something, everybody makes sure that you go through the mill. And the difference is there. So we decided, okay, we can't compete with University of Port Harcourt, for example, that has 40-something thousand students. Their one faculty is even bigger than our own entire university. So on what basis? So we decided to go for benchmarking. And for those who are funding us, benchmarking is as good as ranking. So even if you have not been ranked as #1 in the world, you are benchmarking yourself with institutions like MIT, and just like you showed in your slide, not that you are there, but the slope of that curve, you are trying to make it to, so that maybe in the next 20, 30 years, you hope to get to that level. I think that's what this kind of, and I believe that what we do after the training helps a lot. When we get back to our stations, yes, most of our vice chancellors will not listen, but many. If you write if you go back now and say, I have learned a lot from this professor, this is what I think we should be doing, you may be surprised. The vice chancellor can invite you for further discussion.
Thank you very much. So the bottom line is, don't be depressed.
Thank you very much. I also want to add my voice to theirs that you should not be depressed. I have a background from the industry before I joined the academics. And what I realized is that most of the time it's not even university management or the vice chancellor that is a problem. It's even us. We say who will provide the infrastructure, but the question is, what infrastructure do we need? Is it the vice chancellor that will now have to now design the infrastructure for each and every department, for each and every faculty, and for each and every individual researcher? I've seen instances where opportunities are given and handed down and say, please write the list of the equipment or facilities that you need. You'll be shocked at what some researchers or lecturers will put down. They will put the equipment that should come at the end, they will put it first. And the university will provide that, and there's no way it will work. And then there are instances where they are going to bring sophisticated equipment, but the reagents and materials to run the equipment are not there. So, and is it the fault of the vice chancellor? The answer is no. It's our fault. We also don't really sit down to take our time to actually design the kind of infrastructure that we need. So most of the time we mislead the universities. So they keep providing what we don't need. So, and it seems as if they are not doing anything, but the problem is actually us. But what I've now realized over the years is that people in the university or researchers or lecturers have only been trained to consume. We really don't know how to produce. Probably if we also tie some business aspect to what we do, it will really be able to help us to be able to know how to make our universities to become assets, not liabilities, where everybody just go to pick whatever and then you just clamp on everybody, become professor, and that's it. Then you begin to look for political appointments. So it shouldn't be like that.
Thank you very much. Okay, because you've not said anything today, I give you the mic. Then later I'll wrap up with that.
Thank you, sir. I'm highly in line with what my prof has just said. However, there are some other aspects of it, politically, when you are carrying out a study. And your finding is more or less anti to the policy of the government of the day. How do you go ahead publicizing that type of report? One. Second is that we are talking of issue of mentoring. Mentoring, is it in terms of having somebody who can guide you, or in a situation whereby you have somebody that you are so attached to burden you with a lot of responsibility? I will not even allow you to do what you are supposed to do.
Okay, so two very important issues that have come up, and thanks the two of you for providing that response. It's very spot on. I don't know what to add to it. My only advice is that go back and go and do an inventory of what your university has and what your university intends to have in the next 10 years, 15 years. That inventory is the starting point. I had a lot of scientists in my university coming back saying that we don't have a mega laboratory, and as he rightly said, we said, go and do an inventory and come back to us. It took them more than a year to give us the inventory. So there are instances we complain about equipment, but we don't know the equipment that we need. That's the problem. So the starting point is do your bit as an academic. Go and do the inventory, put it out there. Then say that in the next year, in a very sequential way, I like the way you put it, in a very sequential way, tell us in year 1 we'll need this, in year 2 we'll need that, in year 3 we'll need that. Add an attachment to it. Tell the university the number of publications that are likely to come out if we buy this equipment. The number of citations, the number of extra funding that we are likely to get. I like the business model that he talked about. We have heads of departments sitting here, but we all blame universities. We have deans sitting here, we all blame universities. But what is the university? It's you, the employee of the university. So at all levels, we should be able to make an impact. I started writing memo about 15 years, and some of them, they've not seen the light of the day. But at least 1 or 2 have seen the light of the day, which is fine. We'll continue to write until we see those changes. My good friend, you've raised a very important point. My advice is that you need to be a strategic person. We all worked under people as we were progressing. But what I mean by strategic is that have a career path for yourself. The young ones here, have you assessed your number of publications per year currently and how you intend to grow? These are things that you need to do. In our part of the world, we don't do personal development plans. In other part of the world, you do a personal development plan, you show it to your head, you show it to your dean, and that is the basis for your contract renewal. But a lot of us don't even pay attention to the number of publications that we want per year. And as my sister said earlier on, a lot of us will stay, and he also mentioned it, we will stay when we realize that we are getting to the point where we need our appointments to be confirmed. Then within a year, we look for predatory journals, and we have 5 publications. So you see somebody's CV, 2010, 5 publications. 2011, none. 2012, none. 2013, another 6. For 5 years, you don't see anything. Then another bump. So now we have something we call publication rush for promotion. You cannot be an academic like that. So have your research productivity and output clearly defined. Even if it's 1 per year, you're okay with it. And again, for all these Nobel laureates, they have more than 100 publications, but it's only 1 or 2 papers that have made them Nobel laureates. We need to have that at the back of your mind. 1 paper would give you the needed breakthrough, sometimes for your entire life. Just 1 paper. Work towards that 1 paper. It can take you 30 years. It can take you 20 years. But that is your personal development plan. So irrespective of you teaching 4 courses, you being saddled with administrative duties and so on and so forth, it's you. You're accountable to yourself. That is the first thing. And the only way that you can do it is benchmark yourself against those who have made it and set a realistic goal that you can accomplish. Research reproducibility. I hope to do this in 30 minutes. And I start with some introspection. So can I get your attention on the slide? Have you ever attempted repeating an empirical analysis you previously did? Share your motivation and experience. These are my 2 friends. Can you help us with that introspection? No, you have to. So take it and read what is on the slide and help us with it. Have you ever attempted repeating an empirical analysis you previously did? Share your motivation and experience. If you've never done it, just say no. If you've done it, you tell us what motivated you to do it.
No, not really. I've never gone back. Yeah, there was only one empirical study we did, and the impact was huge. So there was no need to go. Yes, and it was. That should be like about 2014 or 2015. We might go back, but you need to allow time to pass because it had to do with empirical usage of antibiotics anyway. So you can't just go back.
Since you were with your counterpart, let him also help us. Sorry, I'm on you. I just want your attention. Have you ever attempted repeating an empirical analysis?
Repeating, no, but revisiting the data from a different perspective, yes.
Okay. Is it worth doing that?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. So, colleagues, it's a very useful exercise. I would move away from saying it is useful and say that it is indispensable. It is indispensable. And the reason why it is indispensable is what I said to you earlier on. You cannot train graduate students in an area other than your area. So when I enter my research methods class, I give all my publications to my students. I say, each one of you pick any one of them and make an attempt to replicate it. And it would amaze you. Some of them come to me and say that, Prof, this your code, I'm not too sure it was right. I sit down and I realize that it's not right. So it's not that I'm preaching something that I'm not a culprit. If you sit back to repeat what you've done earlier on, as I sit and I speak with you now, there's a current paper, the editors are saying that, redo the analysis, send us the code. I was redoing it, I realized that some of the codes, there was a mistake somewhere. I did not cheat.
Small.
I sit behind the computer the whole night, I'm running this, and I'm not getting the same results that I sent earlier on. You cannot call yourself an academic if you've not repeated your work. I'm putting emphasis on repeat. You doing it yourself. The next question. Have you ever been consulted by another researcher, whether you know the person or not, on the procedures? And here I define procedures. The conceptualization, the assumptions, and codes that you use in an empirical paper. Share your experience. Yes.
Sorry, I did the reverse, where I contacted another person.
Excellent, excellent. So I'm going to come to that, although I don't have, but it's a useful thing. And this will go to the relatively younger colleagues.
Anyone?
Yes.
I was taking VAR and no classical VAR. I was using
for those of us who are non-economists, classical VAR.
Vector autoregressive model.
Yeah.
I took it from economics and I use it for data on climate, temperature and humidity. And somebody consulted me from from India to tell me what is the unit of the rainfall I use. I explained to the person.
Excellent. Is he the only one? Yes, Prof.
Yeah, there was a work we did sometime like over 10 years ago. And just a few months ago, I got a call from a company called, not a company, an NGO called TechnoServe from Lagos. And the young man said he's from the US, he's in Lagos trying to do a work on post-harvest losses in tomatoes. And he said, the question he asked was if I can remember this paper. I said, well, this is like more than 10 years ago. And I said, okay, just call back in 30 minutes. Of course, I now retrieved the paper, and then he called back, and he picked on one of the graphs, one of the things shown. Actually, it was like we were looking at contributions to post-harvest losses in tomatoes. Between from when the tomato is harvested to when it's actually consumed. And so we had this bar chart showing contributions. And so he wanted to know the procedures, how we actually measure this. And honestly, I think I almost forgot. I said, okay, I'll call you back. I had to call my PhD student at the time I did it, who is actually now a professor. And he too was almost, so we had I had some chat with this guy, and then we got back to how we actually measured this. And so I called the guy back, and he said he was trying to do that, but that apparently people are not ready to work with him. Yeah, I think he was trying to do it in one of the popular markets in Lagos, where they bring in tomatoes from northern Nigeria to. So I told him, actually, we did the same kind of thing in the market, but I think his problem was penetrating the people in the market to be able to do these measurements. If you know the local market and how they sell tomatoes in Nigeria, I'm sure it's probably the same all over, where they have these things in baskets. And so in that study, we traced a typical lorry, for example, from somewhere in the north, where it is loaded down to where it's consumed, or the market where it's sold in southern Nigeria, and then took measurements of. And so he was he was finding it difficult to replicate what we did. And so after the explanations, I said, try it, you'll find that it will work. And I think a month later he called back and said yes, that what I told him to do actually worked. He was trying to get this information without buying the tomatoes. So I told him, look, we had to budget money for, as if we were actually buying the tomatoes, and so they were interested in working with us to be able to, without necessarily paying them, but the question they asked at the time was, what is in this for us? So we had to actually buy the tomatoes and then work with them to be able to. But he was trying to go there to ask, and he wasn't getting any data.
Okay, thank you very much. I get excited anytime I'm talking about this because it gets me to say that we need to really rethink the way we are doing things as academics. I always ask myself, if you are a seasoned professor and you've never had a chance to share the assumptions that underlines the paper that you've written. A lot of us write papers without writing the assumptions. You are limited to 6,000, 8,000 words. We write papers without putting in the quotes. We write papers without defining terminologies. So we pick a simple variable like income and put income in our paper. We pick a simple variable like health status and put health status in the paper. But when I go around the room and I ask definition for health status, it would vary across all the 27 or 26 people that we have here. So if you write a paper and nobody has read it, to the point that somebody comes to you to say that, how did you do A, B, C, D? As far as I'm concerned, it should be an issue of concern. And I always say that the starting point is your graduate students. And as you rightly said, if you're a graduate student and you've never had a chance to write to a professor that you found a problem with the work they are doing in the area, to say that, how did you do A, B, C, D? I struggle to find out how we can advance the frontiers of knowledge. We all say we are advancing the frontiers of knowledge by picking different things. So at the end of the day, nobody can say that we are moving from A to B to C. You read problem statements from our research papers, and we seem to be criticizing everything about the paper. Then we end up adding to the confusion in the area. I'm going to show you that on my last slide. One of the highest cited source of problem in the papers that we write is that they are mixed findings, isn't it? They are contradictory findings. With your additional work. Colleagues, let's be honest with ourselves. Yes. Oh, please draw my attention to it. I know there are differences in discipline. So it's simply the statistical syntax that you use in writing your analysis.
But he has an experience to share. That was what I was pointing.
Okay.
Well, I have never used Stata in my analysis.
No, but you've used a statistical software before.
Yeah.
Which software?
Well, I use Medical. I use GraphPath Prism. Sometimes.
And it has syntax.
Well, you can choose to go in the syntax form or just go on the window and point and click. And
okay, so let me say this. It's one thing I'm going to mention when tomorrow I start talking about getting Stata, getting used to Stata. You avoid a drop down. So anytime you have a statistical software, which indeed all the statistical softwares that we have, most of them, come with both the drop down and the syntax. As a researcher, use the syntax. And always add your syntax as an appendix to your published work, so that people who would want to verify your results can do that. That'll be the basis for our conversation from tomorrow. The only way people can verify your results is if you make your syntax publicly available. Yes.
Well, again, it's something, maybe it's area dependent, because most of the publications I've never had an issue where somebody asks me to submit the syntax as part of the publication.
Later in the day, he's going to show you. In medical, he's going to give you journals that are requesting for that.
Okay, so, well, that is it. But I have not had that experience. Maybe it's emerging, but because I've published in Nature, I've published in Science, I've published in BMC. I've not had that issue coming up yet. So maybe when we get there, then we'll see. But again, syntax has to do with more of the code, and then you should know that there's likelihood that many people will not be ready to comply with this, because learning the code now, it takes a lot of time. That's one of the challenges that I have had in the past, and that's why I don't like going near the Stata. I don't want to start putting codes in my head and other things. So, that's one of the challenges that I have, and I don't want to go near Stata. I don't want to start putting codes in my head and then.
But you've decided to come for this workshop.
Yeah.
Okay, colleagues, let's make progress. So, as Professor shared with us earlier on, this can be an embarrassing experience. If somebody is looking for you as a professor, the person has read your work so many years, and the person happens to meet you at a conference. Then I meet Professor Peter. Oh, Prof, I've read this paper, You know this paper that you did. This person is a graduate student. At the conference, there are about 20 people around you. How did you do this and that? I experienced it at the University of Ghana. So this professor, once this graduate student approached him, pretended as if he's had a call. Excuse me. Unfortunately, excuse me, then the professor who is on this phone gets a call. You can see the embarrassment. Excuse me because you've had a phone call, but you are going away and another call comes through. This discussion is tied to the issue of co-authorship. A number of us have our names on publications that we cannot defend. Somebody will say that I did the analysis, I did the literature review, I qualify to be a co-author. Researchers, it's not right. You can do different aspects of the paper, indeed, but you should be able to defend all aspects of the paper. Authorship means you can defend the paper. So don't say that my role was to just do the conceptual review. My role was to just do the discussion, but I don't understand the mathematics, the whatever of it. Even if you don't understand the mathematics, appreciate the intuition underlining the mathematics. We are not all expected to be algebra people. But if you see A and how A turns out to be A minus B, you should appreciate the reasoning behind it. That's all that we are asking of you. I share some, sorry, this thing is a bit blurry. I share some of my personal experiences with you. So this is this email that I got way back in 2016 on a paper that was published in, I think, 2012. And this is coming from Chandi Iduwala. I don't know where this person is coming from. He says, "Dear Sir, Madam, I'm currently reading economics at the University of Warwick, and I'm in my final year. I'm conducting an investigation on the effect of microfinance on poverty at the macro level using mixed market data and the World Bank data. It is very similar to the research paper you wrote along with 3 other colleagues, named Microfinance and Poverty, a Macro Perspective. I'm currently trying to solve the endogeneity problem that you encountered, but do not have access to the cost of enforcement of contract, as you have stated in your paper. Do you know where I can find this data? Moreover, I would like to analyze the regional differences of the impact of microfinance on poverty, but I'm unsure how to do so. I have data for 2002 to 2013. Would it be easier to estimate a pooled OLS or a random effect model, or just use a cross-sectional analysis on each of the years? Any help is greatly appreciated." So I picked 2 of them and I shared that with you. So this also went to my co-author who forwarded it to me. He says, "Hello, Professor Osabo Asari. Please, I'm a PhD student at RIPS, University of Ghana. I'm much interested in a working paper you co-authored with Samuel Kobnenim and Joshua Mweje titled Household Nucleation Dependency and Child Health Outcomes in Ghana. Please, I would like you to guide me on how you computed the household living arrangement using, is it latest? Household composition from GDHS, since it is not explicit in the data set. We write these papers in a very abridged form. So researchers who are interested in replicating your work would definitely have to come to you. If they read only the paper, they cannot do it. I will be grateful for your guidance and coaching." So my co-author forwarded it to me, and this is my response. "Thank you for the mail. I'm happy to share with you the Stata do file. At the end of the day, this is what we are taking home from this workshop. All of us should be able to share our Stata codes. Put it on a platform that everybody can access it. And when people write such emails to you, you should be happily and ready available the Stata codes. You only do that if you have something to hide. That we use in computing the household living arrangement. What I'm not sure about is whether you are interested in the reasoning underlying the computation or the process. Kindly clarify." This is an email that I wrote on 12 February 2016. Colleagues, participants, this is the only way we can move the frontiers of knowledge. So if this student gets what I did, up to the point where I ended, this student can clearly say that I've done a contribution. But if you don't replicate my work, how can you make a contribution? I find it strange if you are training graduate students and you don't put them in the room to replicate other studies. I find it a misnomer. Every doctoral student, every MPhil student, Master of Philosophy student, Master of Science student, the first thing you need to do if you want to start research is to replicate a paper in your area. Even if it's a qualitative data, replicate it in terms of the reasoning behind it, in terms of the thematic issues behind it. But we are training graduate students on this continent that have never replicated a paper. How do you advance frontiers of knowledge if you don't know where it ended? So these are the 2 examples that I share with you. On this slide, I get into reproducibility, and I say clearly from the onset that it is not my goal to give you a definition for each of these. On the next slide, I give you different sources where you can read it. And again, here I agree with my colleague that it is subject specific in terms of what the health scientists would define as reproducibility, replication, reanalysis, and so on. But let me give you a sense of what is the striking difference between these terminologies. If you look at the 2 questions that I posed earlier on, one of them I used the word repeat. The other one I said, have you been contacted by another person? So repeatability is simply redoing your own work. You've done it in the past, you are again involved. Do it again. In contrast to reproducibility and replicability, you are not the same person doing it. Reproducibility says another person should do it, let's see whether the person will get the same results. Replicability says another person should do it, let's see if you can get the same results. Now the distinction between replicability and reproducibility has to do with whether you are doing it based on the same assumptions, based on the same theoretical model, whether you are using it within the same experimental study area or otherwise. So for replicability, we are saying that he's done this in this area. These are the findings. Let me go to another region. Let me use the same assumptions. Let me use the same conceptualizations. Let me use the same theory and see whether I can come up with the same results. Replicability. So the experimental setting is changing. Reproducibility, I say that I'm a different person. I'm doing it in the same area. I have access to your assumptions, your concepts, your definitions, and I want to see if I'm going to get it or not. Reproducibility. Different person, same steady experiment. Do you get a distinction? So let me say that again. You get a distinction between repeatability and reproducibility and replicability. So that's the first distinction. Repeatability is when I'm doing it on my own. So I do a study in 2010, I pick it again, and I'm repeating the same study. It's the same researcher who is involved. Do you understand? So the line of distinction is the same researcher as against the other two, that is another researcher. Do you understand? But the difference between reproducibility and replicability is that in both instances, it's a different researcher who is redoing the analysis. But in one instance, it's saying that, let me use the same concepts. Let me use the same theoretical framework. But let me use a different experimental setting. Replicability. So the experimental setting, depending on your area, could say that I'm using this lab, which has these equipment, and this other lab, which has these equipment. For those of us who go to the field, we can say that I work in region A, based on these definitions, based on this theoretical framework. Let me go to region B. Replicability. Reproducibility, another researcher gets hold of everything that you said you use. You use the Nigerian Demographic Health Survey, you use this theory, and so on and so forth. Can I get the same thing that you claim you got? Reproducibility. So in the paper that I've shared with you, I take the Ghana Living Standards Survey report, which was done by the National Statistical Office, and I say to them that you have 227, and my good friend, this will go to answer your question. When you have a finding that is not consistent with policy and is sensitive to the government in power. So I picked this national report, which has 227 tables, and because I've been working with this data over the years, and it's mandatory for all my graduate students to replicate tables in that report, over time I realized that there are problems with it. And I have a very good working relationship with the National Statistical Office. Then I see problems throughout. Then I ask myself, how do I approach them? As a young person, I feel that, hey, go to them and tell them that out of the 227 tables that you have in your report, about 50% of them don't make sense. Really, which is the case, but it should be kept in this room. But I sit back and reassess myself and say, hold on, you're an academic. Why would you want to put your National Statistical Service in that bad frame? So rethink how you do it. So I go through the process and sample 10% of the 227 tables. I get 22 and work with only that 22. And come up with a situation where it's only 10% that are problematic. So in that case, science suffers a little bit in the name of getting your message out there. The only reason why I say science suffers is that I make sure my percentage of tables that are not reproducible do not exceed 10%. Do you understand what I'm saying? It's not bad science in any way. Because at the end of the day, the goal is that package your statement in such a way that you're going to get the policymakers to respond. Assuming I got all the 22 tables as bad tables. Immediately I finished, I sent a report to the board. that this is what I found with your data. They invited me, we talked over it. And one of the policy changes that is going to happen with subsequent release of national report is that they're going to add the codes to it. So henceforth, our statistical service would make available the syntax, the codes that they use in generating tables. Do you understand? So it varies case by case, and you need to be sensitive about the policy implications of what you are doing. Corroboration, triangulation. I realize that a lot of you say you are mixed method experts. Is that correct? How many of you said that? Do it. Can you explain triangulation for us?
Before that, but I'm just saying that they're not saying they are experts.
Okay, but can you explain triangulation for us?
Well, in my own way, I'm thinking that triangulation has to do with if you are using maybe both qualitative and quantitative methods, and then you need to, in the analysis, you need to, let's say, merge them together, come out with a common finding or something.
Okay, so yeah, it's a good idea. You want to say something? There are one or two people who've still not said anything. I'm going to establish eye contact soon. Yes, I think you want to bail yourself, isn't it? You've not said it.
When we are talking about triangulation, we are saying the same thing in different way, just to bring out the same substance. For example, I can ask of the number of households. By say how many of you are eating from the same pot, or by asking how many are your children, how many wives do you have, how many other people are living with you, just to get the same answer.
Okay. Thank you very much. I think what Prof helped us in saying, when I asked triangulation, you say corroboration. So what you've done in support, you use different methods, do they lend themselves to the same observation, as you rightly said? I put it here because of my experience over the period when I'm reading papers that are mixed methods. They say they do triangulation, and at the end of the day, the findings from the qualitative is different from the findings from the quantitative. And even when the findings diverge, they don't talk about divergence from the triangulation that they thought they were doing or convergence from the triangulation that they were doing. And whether you get divergence or convergence depends on the type of quantitative qualitative method that you use, whether simultaneously or sequentially. So we need to be very mindful when we are using triangulation in the context of reproducing results. Do you understand? To enable one approach to support the other strictly depends on how it was done. If you are using sequential mixed methods, then definitely what comes next is providing a confirmatory, a corroboratory evidence on what you used previously. Again, I've given you, as I indicated earlier on, a web link that would help you get more details into these terminologies and how they differ from one to the other. But as I indicated earlier on, it's pretty much subject specific.
Prof, I would like to ask about meta-analysis and where you would place it in the list of what you gave.
Okay. So that's a good point. So alongside meta-analysis, the other thing we need to talk about is meta-research and metadata. So meta-analysis is the analysis has been done, redo the analysis again, provide further documentation on the analysis so that it would help us do reanalysis. Meta-research, the same. A lot of people have done things on determinants of child malnutrition. Can we put all the studies together and see what is coming up in terms of child malnutrition? Superimposing one research on the other based on different methodologies, based on different data sets, based on different contexts, based on different different data, different methods, different conceptualization and measurement of variables. So as a researcher, you always need to ask yourself, I say I'm advancing the frontiers of knowledge, but I'm not doing meta-analysis. I'm not doing meta-research. I don't have access to metadata. If you don't have these three things, there's no way you can reproduce. So over the period, what I see is that I read a problem statement and somebody says that the last research was done up to 2015. So I'm doing it up to 2018, as I said earlier on. The study that was done up to 2015, as my good friend said earlier on, used a methodology such as the vector autoregressive. So this is a methodology for time series, one of the methodologies for time series people. So the person who did it up to 2009 used another methodology, VAR. Then you are extending it to 2017. And instead of using VAR, you decide to use another methodology, what they call ARDL. Then you get inconsistent findings. Then you are telling me that your work is better than the other. You varied two parameters. One is you've extended the data and you've changed the methodology. These methodologies are sitting on different assumptions. The data sets are different. So at the end of the day, how have you contributed to knowledge? So you read a lot of literature review by our graduate students, and sometimes I don't even start reading. Now I'm getting immune to it. I say that this is a summary of literature. It's not a synthesis. It's not a critique of literature. And we vary so many things, so there's no clear pathway on how we are contributing to the literature. Different types of reproducibility. So it could be at the level of the methods, at the level of the results, at the level of inferencing. So reproducibility is not restricted to only one area or one domain of the whole research, scope of research. It could be at the level of the methods that you've employed, it could be at the level of the results, and it could be at the level of generalization, the inferences that you would want to make. On this slide, I try to give you sources of differences across discipline on the meaning of reproducibility. The first one has to do with the degree of determinism. I wish my colleague from the sciences and the example that my sister gave earlier on can be brought to bear in explaining this. So, to what extent can you say that it is false if I'm calculating? And to what extent can you say that it is false if I'm estimating? You can't get it wrong when you are calculating on something that should be the case. It's determinable. There's no element of error in that. So if you are in a discipline that all that you think about is determining the exactness of the prevalence of an issue, the extent to which you should be able to reproduce is high, because you are not giving room for design bias. You are not giving room for estimation bias. Estimation doesn't go in there. So reproducibility would vary across disciplines if you find yourself in a discipline that is more of telling the exact story rather than estimating what the situation is. The second one is the signal to measurement error ratio. I'll tie this point. Okay, it's not on this slide, but I tied this point to the p-value that I talked about, but let me vary it a little bit. If we say education influences ability to adopt, for instance, fertilization, how would you measure education in this context? Education influences the likelihood of adopting fertilization. How would you measure education? Number of years. Highest qualification. Combination of the two. Informal education. Non-formal education. So you see the degree of measurement error. If I'm a farmer and I'm applying fertilizer because of an agric agent, non-formal education, and somebody who has a PhD has never had an experience with an agric agent would never apply the fertilizer. But we would all pick the agriculture census and either use years of schooling, highest qualification, and you don't find significant results. Then you start blaming ourselves. So go back and ask yourself, how am I measuring the theory? That paper is a very useful paper. It's helped me ever since I finished my graduate work. Theory, conceptualization, and measurement. As I said, it was my source of humility as an empirical analyst. After reading that paper, I realized that we make a lot of assumptions that we are far away from reality. My good friend, you had a question? Yeah.
Yes. Must all our results be significant?
Oh, so this is exactly...
Most of the time, when we run analysis and the result is not significant, we look for a way to make it significant. I mean, by force. What if I do a student do and everything is insignificant? Is that not a result? But it won't be accepted by...
I used to tell my students that even when you have negative results, it's a result. And we've proven that by one student having a negative result all through, and we ended publishing the paper in Elsevier. So negative results can also be a result. You can also be passing the messages across.
Yes, let me go around.
Okay, Prof, mine is, so what if you have a counterintuitive result?
Okay, so instead of positive, you get negative. Yeah.
Yes, yeah. And then you are a student and you need to finish your... Yes.
No, I'll respond to it. I'll respond to it.
I would like to put something in there in terms of the example you gave about education. Most of the publications I've come across, especially in health, you'd see knowledge. And usually I do ask myself, what goes in there to determine knowledge? There's one theory I'm holding on to now. Most of the time you find that we in academia, it's only a selected few who are proficient in actually doing analysis. So you think up the idea and you'd have to pass it on, probably with the data, to somebody you think is an expert in data analysis, to try and engineer the data to meet your written outcomes. So the analyst sits somewhere and will do the analysis for you. And then you do an interpretation of the analysis. And most of the time, you might not be able to control for, most of the things which comes out, because it's not your work, actually. I do say that most of the people who do the analysis, when you put them on the stage, can speak to their work more than even the person who thought of the idea to do the work. So it goes in those two lines. When you were asking the question about education, I was thinking, yes, you can start with education, but then the emphasis of what you see in the analysis or the summaries are from the data analyst and not from the original.
Okay. Thank you. Yes.
I've been trying to, where can we get this paper that you talked about? This is the opting time you've mentioned about this paper on theory, conceptualization. I just Googled it, I can't find it.
Okay. I'll definitely, you found it? Okay. I'll definitely do it during lunchtime. Yeah. Yes.
I just want to say something concerning positive results. It seems as if, from what I understood, that we are looking at positive result as one that is significant at a given p-value. But I don't think that is what a positive result should mean in terms of research findings. There is measurement of outcome, and there is, or should I say, measurement of associations, but there's also test of associations. Test of association is just based on trying to quantify chance, which is what the p-value literally does. But the outcome itself, the association between the two, is a finding. That finding may not be significant at a given p-value or not. So you can also discuss the finding which may be based on what you expect, based on your theoretical framing or what it has been, or may not be the same. But the p-value does not conclude on that finding. It's just quantifying the role of chance, the role of random variations, and your sampling error. It doesn't tell you that this is, that because my finding is above or below a critical, a level of significance, a p-value I've set from, a level of significance I've set for myself, then that means my result is positive or negative. I think we should focus on the measurement outcome itself and not necessarily the p-value. Maybe I've said something useful or not.
Definitely useful.
Thank you, sir. In terms of results, I was listening to Prof when he was talking. Sometimes we may not just accept the results immediately. If a student brings results that is contrary to a priori expectation, we may not just accept immediately. What we should do as academia is we should also get the data and repeat the analysis or do a reanalysis ourselves, not just by the student. And again, some of the problems may come from theoretical framework. Some persons just handpick variables and put in their model without theoretical justification for them. And some of those things may lead to those kind of results. And sometimes some students may do data mining. They just mine the results, fish the data, and that may cause another problem. And again, if eventually these things were looked at, the theory is appropriate and adequate, then the theoretical framework is okay, the modeling is okay. If those things have been verified and the result remains the way it is, sometimes you have to check the method that has been used, because I had a case in my PhD work. I was working on sub-Saharan Africa country using stochastic frontier methodology, and one of my demographic factor ought to have been a positive based on theoretical expectation, but it was not negative. You know, I had to meet my supervisor and say, this is what I have, and he had to rerun it, and he found out the same thing. But when we tried to use, for instance, GMM to do the same, we now found out that it was positive, using GMM. But the essence of our study, one of the essence of our study, is not to just test relationship. We're actually looking at technical inefficiency somehow. We now find out that there's some authors that have done such things, you know, and we read their work and find justification. What I'm trying to say is that if you have results that are contrary to a priori expectation, you should have theoretical justification backing for such things. Thank you.
Thank you. Let me go here. Sorry, those of you not in economics, GMM is general methods of movement.
Well, what I can see to this, the issue is that it could be as a result of the nature of the data that maybe the researcher is working on. So instead of just to test for the normality of the data, they will just work directly with the data they are using. But I must tell you the truth, and I want us to believe that even our researchers, they always believe in deterministic end result. They already determine that our p-value must be, rather than to be stochastic in nature. So yes, because we have to believe in the certainty of the result.
Sorry, with the responses that are coming up, can somebody share the distinction between inductive and deductive research? Let's go back to our very basic research. What is inductive and deductive research? When we are moving from data to theory or theory to data, and what is the role of the estimation that we are doing? It's very basic. And you roll that alongside the issue of research integrity. My good friend, if you set out to test hypothesis, which is governed by intuition, which is governed by theory, you use the data to support it. Deductive research. You don't finish and go back and say that the data is telling me something, so I'm going back to change my hypothesis. There's an element of dishonesty. And I like the response, it's very spot on. If you are not getting statistical significance, you should know why you are not getting statistical significance, and you should be able to convince everybody that you've reached the apex of theory justification, data justification, and estimation justification. So my graduate students, I always tell them that it's not easy to become a genius. For you to tell me that, I give them a simple example, that consumption is not a function of income. This is common sense. And all of us have agreed to it. That's why we are here. We are educated people because we think education has the magic wand. So once you're educated, a number of things will change. So if you are educated and it's not influencing your dependent variable, it might be true, but circumspection is extremely important. You need to make sure that your data is right, your initial conditions are right, your estimation techniques are right, and the theory that we all have agreed on over the years has been problematic. It's possible, but it's a daunting task. If you are, on the other hand, if you are doing inductive research where you are going out there, you don't have any hypothesis. All that you think about is, let me go and look into the data. What the data tells me is what I would accept as finding. It's another story. This is basic research that we teach our students in level 100, level 200. But when we become professors, we depart away from it and begin to put up these arguments. But what led you to do the research? Is it from theory, hypothesis, or data to theory? I hope I'm making some sense. Okay. Any other? Yes.
Thank you, Prof. Sometime, especially when you are working with classical regression, sometimes you may run a regression model, you have a beautiful result. We may not end at that. We'll do some diagnostic testing. Sometimes you fit a regression model, it gives you a positive result. But you'll be surprised that we have the problem of multiclonarity and all that. Then another thing is distribution is very important. Because sometimes if you want to use the classical, we say it should be normally distributed. But when it becomes uniform, gamma, therefore we should know the appropriate model to use, especially for response variables. That's why, like social research now, we can have response variable, maybe 0 and 1. We may have response variable that from count, we have response variable from different distribution. We'll be able to do the right modeling, putting interest on the distribution of the response variable. Very, very important. If not, we may not use statistics rightly. Become a wrong use of statistics, spurious statistics, and useless statistics. Thank you.
Thank you. Do I assume that all of us have some background in regression? Is it erroneous to make that assumption? Let me see by hand if anybody doesn't have an idea about regression. Very little. Okay. So those of us with economics background, if we are making our submissions, let's be mindful. And what I intend even doing on Wednesday, Thursday, is not to go into the details of it, but its use in Stata. But all the points that he's mentioned are very valid arguments. But let's accommodate the diversity in background so that we all will be on the same page. Thank you for those responses. With these other ones, I think they are pretty straightforward. The complexity of designs required in different disciplines will be a challenge for reproducibility. The closeness of fit between hypothesis and the experimental design, my colleague rightly said, the statistical analytical methods, typical heterogeneity of experimental results, culture of replication, transparency, and cumulating knowledge. So my good friend from UDS, this is where you come in. Culture of replication, transparency, and cumulating knowledge. So it is no more subject specific. Maybe in your area, it is not, it has not gathered that momentum, but definitely is going to gather that momentum with time. It's gradually evolving, and I must say that, as I said, it's even more an issue of concern with the medical research because of the direct lives that are at stake. So you know this, papers, as I said, it's mainly on medical research, replicating and reproducing medical research. So it's no more subject specific. Statistical criteria for truth claims, 5%, 10%, 1%. And I find it surprising if everybody or the same person doing research over time would always use 5% as the criteria for the claim of proof. If you ask me whether 5%, 20%, 50% depends on the issue that you are investigating. If you are investigating an issue in criminology, another person is investigating something on HIV/AIDS, another person is investigating something on whether a child would go to school or not. Why do you give the same probability value as 5% for these three different kinds of studies? We need to rethink these things. Purpose to which findings will be put and consequences of false conclusions. As I said, this has gathered momentum in the area of medical research. Thank you very much for containing me up to 13:45. We go on break now, and when we come back, by the time you come back from break, would have put you in 2 groups. Would you want to do your presentation before? No, let them have the discussion. So after break, you know it's always a tricky period for workshops, especially on this part of the globe where our lunch is very heavy. So once we come back, we'll put ourselves into groups. So think about where you would want to be. If later I see that the proportions are not the same, I would appeal to some of you to move. So one group would be discussing whether reproducibility should be enforced. So that group would go for it. Another group would go against it. The group that would go for it would have to provide reasons, and the same would apply for the group that is going to go against it. But I have 2 other questions for the group that is going to go for it. At what stage should reproducibility be thought about? Before publications, when the recommendations are being considered? Or it should be at the level of only methods? Then the other thing they need to discuss is who should initiate it? Who should initiate the reproducibility? If I'm the Minister for Research for a country, I'll make it a mandatory policy for all researchers. Then the group who are going to put up reasons for against it, they have only reasons, but they can go beyond it and ask other questions that would enrich the discussion. Is lunch ready somewhere? Okay. So thank you very much, and we come back at somewhere. When are we coming back? An hour. Okay. So let's take an hour and 10 minutes, isn't it? So that we come back at 3? Yes. It's 13:48 now.